Welcome to Following Spirit Without Hesitation. Stories from journeys into following spirit. I've just forgotten the title of the podcast just then, but
You want to start over?
I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to worry.
Okay.
And so today I'm here with Brianna Wunderlin. Have I pronounced your name right, Brianna? Yay, good. So I met Brianna, it's just at the beginning of the year. We were on retreat in Hawaii together. We were working with a Lahua, the mother dragon tree, from the indigenous medicine there, which was a very, very powerful retreat. And we didn't, though we were in these places, we were in this sort of the same space together for a while. And though it wasn't necessarily a silent retreat, I think we were both very within ourselves during the retreat, but we'd already arranged beforehand to share a room before we left Hawaii. That was once we'd left the retreat. And so we had a day together in Hawaii, in Hilo, and found we had quite a lot in common. We both studied process work, and we both
Yeah.
had a very strong connection with the elemental kingdoms, which was just really beautiful. So we had some fun playing before we both flew out and went our separate ways. So welcome, Brianna. Is there anything else you'd like to say to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm like, woo, bursting out of my skin a little bit. Um, yeah, I mean, we met in such a profound, amazing context, and just like having another person that we both have a background in process work, which is a really fascinating alternative psychological framing method of like conceptualizing the world, drawing in like indigenous but quantum physics and Jungian
Mm.
work and Gestalt and like all this stuff. And it was actually like super relieving to find someone else who had studied process work but then really went on a spirit-led journey. And not that process work isn't a spirit-led journey or wasn't part of our spirit-led journey, because it was, but the part in me that was still grieving when I was in process work was the one that didn't really know yet, because I started process work when I was really young. I was like, I went right out of my undergrad into process work, which was very weird. I was like the youngest person in my program. Everybody else was like in their 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s even, and I was like in my early 20s. And so it was just like, yeah, so much grief, like about not finding my spiritual way in a sense, or not being able to own it as who I was, even though I actually found my spiritual paths when I landed in Portland. Like that was the juncture of me finding my spiritual paths, both my Egyptian soul lineage, which we'll talk about like later, and connecting with the element of fire and grandfather fire and like shamanic traditions. And I eventually went on a yogic path from that way as well. And, you know, all of that was crazy spirit led.
That's yeah, that's so interesting. You say that because though I had a Buddhist practice when I went into process work, it was process work that brought me back into shamanism. So it's interesting you say about that sense of finding finding that sort of that grounding and being able to, at least this is what I'm inferring from what you've said, finding that that direction, even because it embodies so much and it holds so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what does following spirit, following that guidance mean to you? Having had such a, yeah, such a beginning, right, in your journey, that being almost thrown into that place of, this because it is a postgraduate qualification of or container with people who are very often returning to study rather than continuing study. So that's, yeah. So what does that following spirit mean for you?
Yeah. In the moment when you asked me that, in my heart, I was like following grace. Um, and I suppose what I mean by grace is that like mysterious benevolence that has our highest good and highest timeline, you could say, in the supermind or in consciousness. And when we have our hearts open, and I was lucky to have a lot of natural spiritual inclination, and so that I could follow that grace and I could open to that. Um, and so following spirit, and it also like really about following your intuition and your divine connection, and following higher, I don't like the word higher, but in following like these vibrations of like bliss or joy or um also silence and like deep stillness. Now that's more my practice, what is in the silence or deep stillness, which was a lot of the retreat we went on too, was deepening into that place of silence and stillness, and really listening to primordial. So if we want to say following spirit, I really, coming to the weaving aspect, thinking about it right now as like a thread that's being woven from the primordial essence of creation through all the layers of dreaming, through all the layers of subtle reality, um, uh, which we often liken to dreaming states. And both of us have a background in process work. So the dreaming is like everything is being dreamed into this reality, and then it comes into physical form. And so then we're kind of just catching on the physical form, the tail end of the dreaming, and like letting it kind of unfold and open us, and then like catching that thread from the weaver, we could say, or from spirit, and following it,
Yeah.
holding on as close as we can.
And that also shows how our sense of that following spirit, following that guidance, following that intuition changes. Like I know when I was younger, I knew I was following something, but very often it wasn't conscious. I would just find myself in a situation and suddenly think, oh my goodness, how did I get here? And look back. These days I feel like with that thread I'm much more aligned, and I have a much more conscious, though I don't know where I'm always being, I very rarely know where I'm being led. But I mean, obviously with a trip to Hawaii, I need to know enough to get on a plane. But is following, it's much more conscious. So there has been, over the years, there's that change. So, and you kind of in what you're saying are talking about that as well. So do you want to say a bit more about how
Yeah.
that process has shifted and changed for you?
Yeah, I feel like the words deepening wisdom really apply here. Like as you age, you start to deepen in wisdom. And I even though like we have a lot of us, right? We are stars, and we have this beautiful light that is like shining through our beings, and there is a lot of actual power when we're young with that energy that is kind of pulsing, and if we aren't as spirit led, it can get tied up in like matter, really, in destructive ways and stuff like that. And versus like as we start to develop more wisdom or experience with life and learning, we hone that sense of discernment and that sense of like consciousness that can discern, oh, this is the thread of spirit, or this is the thread that's like going to weave me into the tapestry of life, more connected even, and I can stay closer to that connection, which is almost interesting when you think about it, because as you age, you also are um kind of lessening in that. It's not lessening, but it's like yeah, that vital force when I felt when I was young and it was so bright and like it was almost overwhelming, like that's lessened in a degree, you know, but there's also more clarity that has heightened because that's not so like up, you know, which is really fascinating because then you get more subtle, I suppose.
Yeah. And at discernment, I mean, I often think there's this path of discernment that most of us are on to some degree or another. And and as you mentioned earlier, that discernment, and as we learn the subtleties of discernment, it between what is spirit bringing us closer to our spirit and what isn't, and learning to step out of the sort of conformity and conditioning more, it gets simpler. I'm avoiding using the word easier, but simpler. So, would you like to share some stories, or at least start with one story of that following that guidance?
Yeah, I think this origin flow of process work to spirituality is a good story around following spirit because like I'm young, I'm actually like traveling the world at this point. I'm going on study abroads in my undergraduate. I'm 21 years old and I land in Scotland in Findhorn.
Oh, not far from me. It's
Yeah.
111 miles away from me.
Oh, amazing. Way closer than I am right now. And one of my teachers at Findhorn, because I'm taking classes because it's a study abroad program in sustainable living, and she, Gail, or not Gail, Jill, and she was teaching process work, and it was amazing, right, to be like having process work as a class in your undergrad, because technically I'm still in my undergraduate studies. And I just was like, wow, this is really fascinating. And I remember the one night, you know, where I was like reading, I think Sitting in the Fire was the book we were reading for that class. And I was chatting to someone else, I don't even remember, but I was like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. And they were like, oh, well, that sounds like that's what you're going to go do, you know? And so I was like, wow. And so, you know, following spirit in that moment is like a pull. You know, it's not like I really knew what the pull was exactly, but it was like a pull, and it was like something was drawing me towards it, and there was like also a curiosity and like an opening, right? And so then I lived in Arkansas, so nowhere near Portland, Oregon, which was where process work was happening. I ended up then going to Portland, Oregon to do the process work intensive, which is like a 5-week class in my winter break between my 2 semesters. And I followed Spirit there by myself. That was probably one of my first long distance like car rides, but then by then I had kind of traveled a ways, so it wasn't that big a deal. But in that following, I then applied and got into the master's program and moved to Portland. And moving to Portland just opened up many different doorways for me because it was a place where a lot of spiritual things were also arising. And I ended up having a prayer practice and studying, actually getting, oh my gosh, it's such a crazy, wild story. I just think, wow, it's so wild. I ended up meeting a guy in process work who was a shamanic practitioner, and we ended up falling in love. And he was like, I think you're a part of this ancient goddess lineage, this ancient Egyptian goddess lineage. And I was like, well, yeah, of course I'm connected to the goddess. Like nobody needs to tell me that. Like, yeah, I'm completely. And I need a mansplain me that. And then he ended up introducing to me to some of those people who were a part of that ancient Egyptian lineage. And they were like, they were so funny. They were like, hello, this is not protocol. You should not just be bringing her over and be like, here's one of your people. It was really funny. They were like, okay, because they didn't know me. They were just meeting me for the first
Mhm.
time, like introducing me to them. And so I end up going to a place later that year. I actually went back to Arkansas. I graduated from university, and in that summer, I went to an event with these people and found my like soul tribe of people in a really deep way. Also, in a there's like a trauma in a lot of divine feminine lineages that we're all learning how to heal. And so there was also a lot of healing to be done. And that's one of the main aspects of like healing that divine feminine trauma and feminine trauma in general. And so it opened up a whole new kind of world for me, both in the magical sense. Like I was like, wow, I'm an ancient Egyptian priestess. I remember sitting on my toilet after that being like, wow, this is so wild. What a weird thing to have just occurred. And also being like, you know, finding the naturalness in it. Like, yes, of course that's true. Like the part of my soul that knows that, you know? And so it's really interesting, right? That junction, and talk about following spirit. It's like that junction in your mind that happens that you have to kind of deprogram yourself from, which is like, wow, that's a really weird thing. Not kind of in anything I was taught to think about the world, like how the world is create, you know, anything like contextually strange. And then the part of you that just like knows on a soul level, and you kind of sit back in yourself and you're just like, yeah, that totally makes sense. So I think that's like another huge like key, you know, for following spirit. It's just like when you sit back, and especially I feel it in the moment in the back of my heart, and you like are like, yeah, you know, that makes sense. Then you know. So that's like a really
Yeah.
amazing that I've ever told that like publicly on an interview, like in a context like this. I also felt
Uh,
myself nervous like talking about it. So yay.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. And yeah, I recognize that, and that deep knowing. And I think very often, this, we're taught to override that in
Yeah.
sort of conventional society. So before we move on to another story and follow some more of your threads, I'm curious, how did you find the weaving together of discovering that, that ancient Egyptian feminine, divine feminine lineage with something like process work? Because as unconventional as process work is, it does sort of straddle both the conventional and the unconventional, right? So it's which is a good thing to have, because it acts as a container.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, it was all so new to me. Like everything was so new. So both process work and being in a program like that and everything that was happening, living in Portland in a bigger city, and like finding out you're part of this ancient Egyptian lineage in, and I had community in Portland that were a part of the sacred fire community that was connected to that ancient Egyptian lineage. The containers were connected, those two groups. And so I had those people to kind of ground in with, and other people there to kind of help hold that space of unfolding for me. So it didn't feel conflictual to me in any way. I was just like everything. And it also, I think process work super helped me learn how to unfold many things that were arising, and like helped me work with the different layers that were coming up, you know, to be sorted almost like sorted out in a way. But it wasn't like at that point I don't know that I felt like I was consciously sorting out, but it wasn't like I was doing that on purpose. It was just like, I'm in this learning program and this is what we're doing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been talking about or referred to some of your travels and this Egyptian thread that you've got running through, which I know is something you're quite excited about. And there's something else we found we had in common when we were in Hawaii is that I don't think we're in Egypt at quite the same time, but roughly the same time, which was curious. So I believe you have a story about following spirit from your time in Egypt or going to Egypt. So, would you like to
Yeah,
share
totally.
that?
Um, well, it's really interesting because I've been a part of this ancient Egyptian goddess lineage, well, for lifetimes, but for in this lifetime, since I was 21 and then practicing with them. So like making relationship with ancient Egyptian Neteru, which are like their word for deities, although it's not quite, this doesn't quite mean the same thing. More because it more combines with the forces of nature as well
Hmm.
and has more of an elemental, I would say, connection, strong connection. And so starting to learn slowly about that cosmology, like through my 20s and 30s. Now I'm in my late 30s, even though probably everyone in this who's watching this is like, what? Oh, I still get carded. um, yeah. And so unfolding that over time is such a beautiful way to learn about a cosmology and start to make relationship, um, which really sets you up for a good foundation to go to somewhere like Egypt, and start to interact with the ancientness of that land. And I had been in this lineage for so long, and we also have a pilgrimage that we go to. And this pilgrimage is to a goddess site, but it's not in Egypt. But it's linked to Egypt, this site, which is really fascinating. So if you're into like, and probably everyone who's watching this, part of your audience is, into ley lines and into how different sites, of course, link to other sites and, across the world. And so going to this site is very much similar energy to a specific site in Egypt. And so I had been in devotion on pilgrimage. And when I say pilgrimage, I don't just mean like I went to this site. I mean like I fasted for multiple weeks, and did similar things like for our journey as well. We also did a cleansing purification period with certain like dietary restrictions, certain um, restrictions in how you held your consciousness and attention, very much
Yeah.
coming inward with that attention and consciousness and learning how to keep that there, learning how to keep that stillness and kind of close off from the outside world, close off from all the noise. And so that's in my mind when I think of pilgrimage, people often say like just going to somewhere and visiting there is a pilgrimage. That is a pilgrimage in a way, but to really make relationship with somewhere in a potent way that you are doing purification to ready yourself to receive the energy and the relationship, and to as well in this instance it was about creating a prayer with this place.
Yeah.
And so having that unfold over time, and I went on that journey 8 times, and you're supposed to, and you commit to a certain like 5 years of commitment. I went more years than that. And so having that as another really strong basis before I even got to Egypt, I already was filled with weaving connections inside myself to these places and energies, which is really fascinating. And then when I finally arrived in Egypt and I got the message like from spirit, okay, it's time to go. And it was like I'd been thinking about it, for years, and I had definitely been contemplating it in the last, years before I went strongly. And then like in one day, it was just like, you should look for airline tickets, like right now.
Amazing.
And I was like, okay. So and that's another cool thing about like following spirit is when you just have the intention, and I feel like this is how it unfolds a lot. You just have an intention or a prayer, and then you put it out to the universe, and then you just kind of wait for the moment to arise when the timing is right. And the universe is like, this is it. Go now,
Mhm.
you know?
Yes. And
Which,
sometimes you can wait years and other times it's minutes.
yeah, totally, totally. Which is very another deprogramming of your mind of like, oh, I have this thought now, I have to do it right now, you know?
Yeah.
Which,
That's a really important thing to share. Yeah, thanks for that, Brianna.
yeah, totally. I mean, even in, of course, like I'm a spiritual practitioner as well, and I aim to exchange my gifts for financial abundance too. And in so much of that teaching, it's like, act now, act now, act now, like with money and stuff like that. And you're like, but that's not in the kind of flow of how I want to orient my life towards the livingness of life and towards the whole of the intelligence of life.
Mm.
So, yeah. Mm. Right. So then I was like, get flight tickets. And of course, Universe is always looking out for me. So I got super cheap flight tickets to Egypt. And then I took my partner with me, and I feel like he 100% has a strap. I felt like it before when we met, like, oh, we know each other from Egypt.
Wow. That's
And so I was like, you're coming with me. And he was like, okay. And also in that kind of context, like we have to bring in the modern of like Egypt, which is now a Muslim country. And it is not that women are disrespected in that country. I did not feel disrespected, but when
quite
you
the
go,
opposite in
huh?
many cases. Quite the
Yeah,
opposite. Yeah.
yeah. But having a male as a companion is very respectful. Like when you're interfacing with a lot of men energy who are used to interfacing with each other to like decide things and kind of do different things like that. I felt like it was a protection and also just like necessary, but it was also necessary for both of our spiritual unfolding as well. And then I just talked to like everyone I could find about Egypt and like who, what's going on, all the deets that I could get. And I knew someone who was leading pilgrimages there. I talked to her about helping me design a trip. I actually ended up arranging pretty much all of my own travel just on spirit guidance, including like, because I'm trying to listen for everywhere. So that thing about sitting to listen, right? That's like huge spirit following. And at one time, it was like I couldn't decide where I was going to stay in Cairo because there's all these, and I'm more like traveling on a budget. And so there's all these like different hotels you can get on a budget, but you're also kind of like, like, you know? And so I wrote
Yeah.
down, I wrote my own like little tarot cards for all the different places.
When I get to that point, I love the tarot cards. I put them on pieces of paper and fold them up and put them in a little box or hat or something and draw one out.
Uh-huh.
When it
Yeah,
kind of
that's what
like,
I, yes, exactly. Exactly. That's what I ended up doing.
oh, wonderful.
I know. For the other places I stayed, I was pretty certain I was just like that place. But in Cairo, there's like a lot of places. And so,
Yes.
but we ended up choosing like the perfect place, and it was like right by the Great Pyramid. And like when I got to Egypt, I was like, we were at the Pyramid. I was just like, what? I was like, this is insane. Was amazing. And as well, I was like awake at like 3 a.m., like with the energy, which is also just Cairo. Cairo people are awake like 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But being right next to the Great Pyramid is like you're getting like waves and waves of energy like from that structure, which is just it's an amplification structure of like energy. So just like whoa, you know. And when I finally like got there the next day, like during the day, you know, I just like started crying because I was like, oh, this is like could feel the levels of like my soul like grounding to its soul homeland as well. And just being like even in my morning meditation then like just being welcomed by the different um the different Neteru like that I have been in relationship with, and then feeling them on the land of Egypt itself was like totally different, which is so amazing because really all these cosmologies and all these relationships with these like subtle beings, elemental beings as well, they're tied directly to land, you know, and they're tied
Yeah.
directly to how the energy of land flows. And so you can't ground into a cosmology or an energy until you actually like sit on the earth where they like where those stories arose. um yeah, so it was like really powerful and amazing to do that. And then my whole journey through Egypt just was like unraveled so beautifully, and like everything was just a total flow, like totally like in the flow of it, and um just felt miraculous, you know, and felt so wide open. I had many moments of crying and just being like, oh, like feeling my soul there, and feeling the different ancient levels and layers of time that were there, and being able to connect to them. And in that way you collapse time in a sense as well, because there is no time, there's only one time. And so when you
Yeah.
kind of in such a cool place where there's layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of actual history on a site, you can start to feel all these layers at one time because they're very strong. And then you're just like, wow, you know, it is all existing. It's another cool moment of being like, yeah, there's no time, we're all existing at one time.
And yes, but that's also the beauty of being in flow. And then we're in flow because we're aligned with spirit, and we're also engaging respectfully as well. And
Yeah,
so all of that combined enables that beauty and that magic that we can experience.
yeah, yeah.
That's,
I want to totally highlight that because, you know, I made hella prayers before I went to Egypt, you know, and I made many offerings, especially to Sekhmet, who I work with a lot. And she is the lion-headed goddess, fierce lady, and a very powerful being, very powerful protector being, very powerful for me, a protector or a protectress of the divine feminine and of my lineage, and of I think in that of many lineages of divine feminine. And so there was many prayers I made to her before I even went to Egypt, and specifically about that. And so, you know, engaging with a place on that level, I think is how you make relationship with spirit in a way that you can easily enter that flow, because you've already done the kind of the prep work to align yourself with that energy and ask those energies to help you align while you're there.
yeah. And I think also it highlights the beauty of, you know, when we're following spirit and we're following our guidance, we can have this sort of one overarching story, but within that story there are hundreds and hundreds of moments of that constant um, moving towards spirit and moving towards spirit, because we have choices in every moment, you know, and
Yeah,
that's also part of the timelessness, isn't it, as well?
yeah, it is. And that was like a really beautiful, and on my journey like with Nick there, he's very a very flowy being, and I get a little bit more like, but I because I made the whole structure, I planned the whole trip, and I'm just like, okay, this is what we just got, and we had gotten into Luxor. We went on a late night flight to Luxor, and Luxor was my prime place that I wanted to be at. I wanted to be at Karnak. I wanted to visit Sekhmet in her temple at Karnak, in her chapel at Karnak, and also the Moot precinct, and Mother Moot. And that was my kind of my main pivotal place that I wanted to be in Egypt. I was like, this is my mission, this is what I'm here for. And so I was a little bit like crunchy around that, like a little bit tight, like, oh, this needs to happen. And he was like, don't worry about it. And like and thankfully I was like in the place where I could really receive that. Because we like woke up late because we were on a late night flight, and like I was like, we need to get there, and he was just like, it's all good. Don't worry about it. And like we're having a later breakfast, and like it's kind of turning into like a leisurely like stroll where we're taking a boat across the Nile River. First time I'm taking a boat across the Nile River. I'm also like crying, like, oh my gosh, the Nile River, I know you so well and you're a part of my being and I feel so connected to you. And it was just like so beautiful. And I think we might have even had coffee before we were going. And he's like, it's all in the flow. Don't worry about it. And then it was like, we didn't end up getting to Karnak till like 3 in the afternoon, which for me in my like, I need to get there state was, but still. And it was the perfect timing because
It always is.
the perfect guards were there at the Moot precinct, an actual like priest type guards, because at every place in Egypt there are these like guardians
Yeah.
also to help the public and not get into any trouble at the site, and to like protect the site, but also to they kind of lead you around, and they potentially act kind of priest like or something too. But this guy was actually like you know a priest in a way, and he
Mm.
um led us to the sacred lake, led us to this like site, in where we could go into the stone, like into the site itself, like underground, which was amazing for me, because I love caves and everything under the earth. And then led us to the sacred lake and was like, sit. We were wanted to meditate there anyways, but he was like, yes, sit, anything you want to do is okay. We wanted to actually burn an offering, and he was like, okay, just don't let the guards see. And so he was all like, and a lot of times they're not like that. Like they're like, no, you can't do that or something like that. And this guy was like all about it. He was like, yeah, and I brought a little bottle to as well fill up with water at the sacred lake, and he was like, he had a huger bottle, and he was like, no, you want this bottle. And he like saw what I was doing and filled up the whole bottle for me and gave it to me, his bottle. And then we like sat there like in silence, for quite a while, just meditating. And I got some, beautiful downloads and in meditation there. And then at the end, he touched both of our heads and like said a prayer. I don't know what language he was saying this prayer was. It did not sound like Arabic to me, but I'm not sure. And then we were like, wow. And then he was like, now hug, which is also a rare thing that like a more Muslim
Yeah.
guy is telling like a couple to hug, because, like touch things are kind of,
In
more,
public. Yeah.
yeah, public touch is more boundaried like there. And he was like, now
Mhm.
hug. And it was the completion of my meditation downloads that I was receiving, that we hug for, because it was about the masculine and feminine like coming together in this like sacred, beautiful way. And I was like, wow. So it's just like, and I was mega high after that. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. I really love how some, like you say, some have that really deep spiritual understanding of the places that they're guardians of. And so we're always fortunate to cross paths with them. Wow. So Brianna, I really enjoyed listening to your 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 stories and your especially your recent travel to Egypt. And I understand that you're going to be going back and leading a retreat there.
I I am. I'm so excited. So for everyone who made it to the end of this video and was riveted, congratulations. I love you. And I am facilitating a trip to Egypt, which is also totally spirit led. Sekhmet is like, yeah, do it. Let's do it. And like every door has like just opened for me to pretty much like organize this with help, with help from people who have been organizing trips for many years. But it's just like every moment of this trip so far, a sacred doorway has opened to let us stay at all private venues, and to stay at an eco lodge on the original island of where the Temple of Isis is, which is a place that's not even on the map. Another spirit led moment, I happened to meet this lady like on the bank of the island because I was sitting there looking at the gate of Isis, which is the only original part of the Isis temple on this island, because they actually moved the whole temple from this one island when they put the Nile um, dam up because it was going to flood it. So they moved it to a whole other island. So on the original island, the gate of Isis is still there. So we were sitting there just like making offerings, sitting in silence, and this lady like walks up with her group of people, and we're like, because there's only one other place on this island, and we're like, whoa, who are these people? So we start chatting to her, and I was kind of like, can I get your contact, and she was like, oh, people just meet us by like washing up on our shore. And I was like, okay. So I didn't like get her contact, and from that moment on I was wanting to have it. And then this trip arose, and I was like, man, I need to get that lady's contact. How am I going to get it? And then Facebook showed me one of her posts. And I don't think I was even following her, but it just like came up, and I was like, that's that lady. And then I messaged her, and she was like, yeah. She was like, I remember you. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm taking a group. And she was building a place there. It wasn't done yet. And she was like, yeah, it's just been finished. And like, yeah, you can come stay there with your group.
Wow. So literally washing up on her shore.
Yeah, literally washing up on her shore. And she has like her place is also designed like as a temple place to Isis. And so it's just been like that unfolding. Like the boat that we're going on is as well a boat that was constructed as a goddess, the Nun goddess, which is the primordial waters, the goddess of the primordial waters. And this boat was from spirit intelligence of this woman who then had it built, and it has like a blue lotus pond on board on this boat. And it's so amazing, and she's amazing, and she's given me amazing support. And so we're gonna be on her floating temple boat, which is also rare because like we say, like Egypt is a Muslim country, so even though there's many boats, most of them are more touristic or more like built in a style that is more, let's say, modern Egyptian, not like ancient Egyptian
Mhm.
connection in a way. And so, and then I ended up just then I was like, where are we staying in Luxor, and I have this list of places I've researched, and ones I'm like, this is cool, and I was like, yeah, but I'm missing something. What am I missing? Because I none of them kind of hit the spot just right. I was like, something is missing. And I was like, I'm gonna check Airbnb. And so I check Airbnb, and I find this place that has enough spaces for all the people that I would like to invite. And it has a dome meditation chamber with a statue of Sekhmet in it. And
Wow.
I was like, what? Also rare. Just let me tell you, you think there's a bunch of
Yeah.
places with statues of Sekhmet everywhere. No, there's not.
There's
It's a,
not. I did go to someone who collected like small activated Sekhmet statues, and it is rare, yeah, to come across them. Yeah.
yeah, it's rare. And then here's a big one in this meditation chamber. I'm like, all right, but I still am unsure for some reason because I don't really have a contact with this person, so I message them on Airbnb and start chatting with the guy who's running the place. And I was like, have you had many American groups there, and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah. And he's like, we own the Nun goddess. And I was just like, I didn't ask him about that at all. And that's the boat we're going on. He's like, we're the same people that own that boat. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
And so Spirit weaves, you know, we kind of started off early on talking about this beautiful weaving. I'm so excited for you. I think I'm going to have to go on your retreat, Brianna. I'm so excited for it. And for
Yeah,
you and for running it, it sounds really amazing.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
So,
And
so, so when is it? When is it going to be?
uh, it's over the spring equinox in March 14th to the 22nd, which I also got strong guidance about. Oh, I almost have goosebumps like saying that. Like when I sat down to meditate about, okay, when is this retreat going to be? And my preference was like February, because in March it starts to get a little hot. Um, and when I sat down to meditate with Sekhmet, she was like, third week in March. And I was just like, all right, that was super clear. And then I looked, of course, the third week of March is the equinox. And then there's
Wow.
like a whole procession of planets, like a whole astrological alignments happening at that time. And so, yeah.
It's going to be a potent time in 2026. I mean, we were together in the equinox in the beginning of this year, weren't we? March
Yeah.
equinox. So
Oh my gosh. All right, equinox reunion. Yes, please.
let's call that in.
Yeah, so anyone who's watching this and spirit led in that way, and if you're like, wow, I want to go on that trip, she's gonna put my contact information. So just reach
Yeah.
out to me and get the info. And there should be maybe the website up by the time you read this. But
Yeah,
yeah, it
well,
sounds
I'll add it later if it's not ready, but I'll put Brianna's details,
yeah,
contact details below. But if once that more information about the retreat is ready, I will add that as it becomes available.
well,
That's not a
yeah.
problem.
And that's one of those moments that if you feel like you're like into this and you've listened to this whole thing and you're like, whoa, like, yes, like, and you're like, how would I ever go on that? That's another like following spirit moment.
And it's amazing. I imagine you've had a similar experience, but I felt really strongly called to go on certain things in the past, and how am I going to get the funding? And it always shows up. It
Yeah.
always shows up, and spirit often leaves confirmation in different ways to, like, say not to worry. It will show up if So I trust now so implicitly that, okay, if I'm supposed to be there, I know that the funding will, what I need is going to show, is going to manifest in some way.
Yeah.
And the whole plan of your retreat is just a beautiful example of that, but in a complex weaving as well, which makes it even more exciting as
Yeah,
each piece
totally.
falls into place, huh?
Yeah, totally. And it's good that
Well,
my
thank you for sharing, Brianna.
thank you.
I
It's
really
so
look
fun to be
forward.
with you.
Yeah, I really look forward to hearing more and finding out more about how it all unfolds. And let's see if Spirit agrees that I can go, because I feel very excited about joining you now. And yeah, is there any things you'd like to say as we say goodbye to all those who've been listening or watching?
Yeah, I think, following spirit is one of the most pivotal actions you could take in this timeline, because that is how we reorient everything back to spirit. So just like it really is one of those most pivotal actions you could take if you're taking actions every day and learning how to be in that flow, which probably most people watching are in that flow, but just like knowing that it is a huge thing that we're doing together and helping actually turn an entire trajectory timeline. Like that's what we're doing when we follow spirit. So it's a huge action.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for your wisdom and eloquence, and sending everybody much love from my heart and to yours. Thank you for watching and listening.